Live from Town Square Towers at the heart of the Jersey Shore. Wake up with Jeremy Grunin. Get up, get out, do something. Join the conversation. 732-505-1160. News Talk Radio WOBM AM 1160 and 1310. Listen online at WOBMAM.com.
Hey, welcome back. Wake up with Jeremy Grunin, 7:08 Wednesday, July 6, 72 degrees, set up to 89 today, WOBM AM 1160 and 1310 News Talk Radio. Streaming live on the radio pop app at WOBMAM.com, 732-505-1160. To join the conversation, we are now joined by Robert Schenk. He is Junior, and he is the Ambulatory and Pharmacy Services Manager at Meridian Health. Good morning, sir.
Hey, good morning, Jeremy. How are you?
Oh, I am living the dream. So we're talking today medication management, whether or not you're at risk for medication-related problems, right?
That's correct.
So what does that mean? What is a medication-related problem?
Well, a medication, it's always good to have a definition, right, for
Sure.
something that we're going to start talking about. And so the way it's defined generally and accepted is it's a medication-related problem. It's an event or circumstance that has interfered with somebody's drug therapy or may interfere with it in the future, and therefore the patient is not going to experience the best outcome, or at worst they could experience something a severe problem.
Okay, got it. Now, in looking at your background, it appears that you've only done pharmacy, it looks like, for 30 years or so. So I don't understand. What makes you so qualified to speak on this matter?
You're right. It is true that I've been practicing for 30 years, and I've kind of been part of this wave of the way pharmacy practice has changed over that time. But it's important, I guess, for your listeners to know that as I've changed, so has the education of today's pharmacists. So all the young men and women coming out of pharmacy school are well qualified and able to deliver the same kind of services that we deliver at Ocean Medical Center. And in fact, it's part of their curriculum now, and it's part of the way they're trained. It's kind of a different way to look at pharmacy, and frankly, it's the way pharmacy should be practiced.
So now, before we get into the nuts and bolts of this, I always like to ask, and I think it's particularly interesting when I see a product of the 60s and 70s, and I say, so how did you decide that you wanted to get into pharmacy? There are so many easy jokes that go along with that, but do you remember what that aha moment was for you?
Oh, absolutely, sure. I grew up in Hazlet, New Jersey, and a small suburban community in Monmouth County, and we had occasion to visit the local community pharmacist, Hazlet Pharmacy, owned by Tony Jacopino and family. And back in the 60s, I guess most pharmacies were small mom and pop shops. And I just got such a great feeling whenever we had to go to that pharmacy about the caring and empathy that he exhibited towards my family and the service that was provided. And then as I got older, I really gravitated towards math and science in school. And I also had an entrepreneurial streak in me as well. So all those things kind of came together probably early high school, and that was when I kind of had the aha moment and said, yeah, this has got everything that I want to do. And so that's when I made a decision to pursue a career in pharmacy, and I haven't regretted it for one day.
Very cool, very cool. All right, not as juicy as the story I was hoping for, but it's still good. So let's get back to the issue at hand here. So we're talking about medication management and how you can be at risk for medication-related problems. So near and dear to the hearts of so many in Monmouth and Ocean County, why are seniors at such risk for these issues?
So there's good and bad news, right, on that. We're living longer is kind of the bottom line, the foundation. And because we're living longer, as we live our lives and we become more susceptible to more chronic diseases. There's a whole number of reasons for that, whether it's diet or heredity or what have you. But as we live longer, we start to have get overweight, maybe then get susceptible to high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, and so forth, and with progressions from there. So the longer we live, the more likely we are to have chronic diseases. The more chronic diseases we have that we treat with medications, therefore, the more likely we are to have multiple medications that can interact, or each one has the potential to cause its own side effects. I've presented around a number of adult communities throughout Monmouth and Ocean County over the years, and I always start out my presentation with a slide, and the slide shows 4 different what I call risky behaviors, and the first one, being a high-rise window washer. The second one is a guy getting shot out of the cannon at a circus. Right. The third one is a lion tamer, and the fourth picture is a lady sitting at her kitchen table with 10 bottles of prescriptions. And,
right.
And kind of the tongue-in-cheek question is, which of these 4 pictures represents the highest risk? And of course, the answer is the lady with the 10 different bottles of prescriptions. And the reason for that is, we know that for every prescription medication a person takes, they have about a 10% risk for experiencing a medication-related problem. And that risk compounds with each additional medication. So by the time you get up to 10 medications, you almost have about 100% chance or risk of having or will have a medication-related problem.
Right.
Now, those problems can range in seriousness. So not every problem is a life and death situation. If you're taking a medication and it's causing your stomach to be so upset that you can't take that medication, or it's causing nausea and vomiting, well, that's a medication-related problem. And at the other end of the spectrum, if you're taking a Coumadin or a blood thinner, and you take something else that interacts with it that then causes you to bleed, so that you have to go to the emergency room, and it's a life-threatening problem. So there's the whole spectrum, of course, but that lady with the 10 medications is actually a higher risk than for having a problem than those other folks that I described.
Cool. Robert, when we come back, I would like to, if we can, really dive into the types of issues that seniors can have with medications, because I know there's
Sure.
it's not just, you kind of alluded to the fact that there's so many different kind of variables and variations on that. And then most importantly, we'd like to really kind of dive into how we can prevent this and how we can have the good folks in Meridian, among others, kind of help us make sure that we're on the right path. Okay?
Sounds great.
Cool. Robert Schenk, Manager, Ambulatory Pharmacy Services at Meridian Health. Back after this.
Wake up with Jeremy Grunin wherever you go. Download the Radio Pup app for your smartphone or tablet. News Talk Radio WOBM AM 1160 and 1310. Connect with Jeremy, 732-505-1160. Wake up with Jeremy Grunin. News Talk Radio WOBM AM 1160, 1310, and WOBMAM.com.
Hey, we're back. We're talking to Robert Schenk Jr. He is the Manager of Ambulatory Pharmacy Services at Meridian Health. And we're talking about medication management and whether or not you're at risk for medication-related problems, and more importantly, how you avoid it. So, Robert, what are some of the types of issues that seniors have with medications?
Well, they can run the whole gamut of problems, but one of the things I like to say is why are seniors or why should they be concerned about medication-related problems? And it basically boils down to this, and this is kind of what I've seen over the years. Anybody that's gone to the local pharmacy and picked up their medication, you come out with one of these giant lists of possible side effects, right? It's like 3 pages long. It says if you take this medication, look out for all these side effects, and things could be on there like confusion or depression, or you can't sleep at night, or you have tremors or incontinence or weakness. Well, so as a pharmacist and as the consumer, those all sound like side effects, right? But if somebody isn't aware of that, and then they go to their physician and they complain of, let's just take tremor for example, and they've discovered that they're starting to get a little tremor in their hand, maybe, or their other hand, and what we're afraid is going to happen is that the physician is going to not think about what medications the person is on, but rather look at those side effects as a symptom of a new disease that he or she has to treat, right? So now they want to give you a new medication to treat that problem. And that's the main reason. That's kind of the risk that we we take, and that's why it's so important for everybody to understand that a side effect of a medication is not necessarily a symptom of a new disease that has to be treated with another medication. And unfortunately, the state of medicine these days and the pressure on physicians and the time constraints that they have to work under in a lot of cases doesn't allow them to time or have all the resources available for them to look into what other medications patients take in, what are the potential side effects of those medications. So as kind of a senior care pharmacist, and we kind of go by an edict that says any symptom in a senior should be considered a drug side effect until proven otherwise. So that's how we look at things when for example, I sit down with a patient and do what we call a medication therapy management consultation, try and rule out all the drugs as potential problems. And I don't know if you want to go into it, but I've had experiences over the years now doing this where I had a patient that was taking 18 different medications, was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, was given medications for the Parkinson's disease, but when we actually broke everything down and looked at it, their tremors were being caused as a side effect from another medication called metoclopramide. So, they in fact didn't have Parkinson's disease, and this happens, day after day, patient after patient, not necessarily Parkinson's disease, but other maladies. So that's why this is so important. We want to see people take as few medications that are as effective as possible and kind of limit their exposure to any of those side effects or interactions.
So what do you recommend? So is this kind of what the Pharmacology Institute at Meridian does? Is they're kind of going to sit down and break it down with you, or what? How would somebody address this?
Yes, exactly. Well, first thing we want to know is, just a little history is about 10 years or so ago, John Lloyd, who's the president of Meridian, had been to a White House conference on aging where they had discussed the topic of the increasing numbers of seniors in particular that were showing up at emergency rooms around the country with issues that were related to their medications. And so he came back to Meridian and he said, hey, is this happening here? Are we seeing this as well? And lo and behold, they were. And so they went out and they got a grant that was actually what brought me to Meridian, and we established this Pharmacological Institute, as they called it initially. And the idea was to go out in the community, identify patients at risk, and see if we could do something ahead of time to prevent them from having to come in the hospital in the first place, because that was kind of the key with all these folks that had been coming to the emergency room or being admitted, was that 9 times out of 10, if somebody had had the opportunity to really sit down and evaluate their regimen with them, we could have prevented it. And so that was the service that we built at Meridian. And like I said, I spent a number of years going through the communities, kind of explaining that service, and over the years I've probably done over 1,000 consultations with patients. Wow. And some of them very serious, some of them not so serious. But I hope we've had some kind of an impact on the health of the community by identifying people, and I know we have that would have otherwise had bad reactions.
Very cool. So when we come back, I'd like to hit on prescription drug costs, generic versus brand drugs, and of course we're going to hand you your magic wand. Okay. All right. Robert Schenk, manager, ambulatory pharmacy services of Meridian Health. Wake Up with Jeremy Grunin, Hometown View in the news, and then back with us. Wake Up after this.
The news is next, live from the WOBM Newsroom, the Town Square, New Jersey News Network, and Fox News Radio. Wake Up with Jeremy Grunin, News Talk Radio WOBM AM 1160 and 1310. Live from the Jersey Shore to the world. Get up, get out, do something. Wake Up with Jeremy Grunin. Take the show wherever you go. Download the free Radio Pup app for your smartphone or tablet. Join the conversation, 732-505-1160. News Talk Radio WOBM AM 1160 and 1310. Listen online at WOBMAM.com.
Welcome back. 7:35, Wednesday, July 6th, 72 degrees. Get up to 89 today. WOBM AM 1160 and 1310. News Talk Radio. Streaming live on the Radio Pup app and WOBMAM.com. 732-505-1160 to join the conversation. We are joined on the phone by Robert Schenk. He is the manager of Ambulatory Pharmacy Services at Meridian Health. Sorry, I had to turn the page. Did a bad job there. So, Robert, we were talking about the exploding cost of prescription drugs. What should people know about that?
Yeah, I mean, if there's not a day that goes by, Jeremy, I don't think where you pick up the New York Times or Wall Street Journal or just about any publication and find a story about the increasing price of prescription drugs and what the causes are and how that leads to patients maybe not taking their medication. So what's behind it seems to be a couple of factors. One is a kind of a different philosophy on the part of some of the pharmaceutical manufacturers. In the old days, so you had Merck, Sharp and Dohme and Letterly and a couple of other companies, and they honestly seem to take their profits and reinvest them in research and development and come out with new medications that seem to be reasonably priced. But now there seems to be a new model of pharmaceutical company, and I'm sure most of your listeners remember just last year the images of the Turing Pharmaceuticals CEO Martin Shkreli, the young kid that eventually ended up in jail, but he took a drug that cost $1 a pill and raised it to 5,000% to $750 a pill overnight, right? And other companies like Valiant Pharmaceuticals, where we were taking care of patients that took a drug called Glumetza for their diabetes at about maybe $5,000 a year, and he raised it to $80,000 a year. And the model is basically that to get as much return on their investment as quickly as possible, through the financial markets, and I guess generate big salaries and bonuses for themselves, but at the expense of patients. So that's one part of the problem. The other part is, the pipeline of drugs that's coming out, for the most part, is what we consider specialty drugs, and these are the really drugs that treats patients that don't. There's not a lot of patients, for example, but the drugs can be critical to their life. So Harvoni came out last year in 2015, and it treated hepatitis C, and at a cost of about $100,000 a patient for 12 weeks of therapy. And that's not necessarily a crazy thing because it cured hepatitis C. So, curing a disease like that meant that patients that had hepatitis C didn't have to have a lifetime of, liver problems and potentially transplants and things like that. So that was actually an expensive drug, but not a bad thing in relationship to what the alternative was. But as there's about 600 new drugs in the oncology pipeline. Well, you can be sure when they all come out, their prices are going to be expensive as well. So, the long-term effect, though, is that we all typically rely on insurance to pay for those drugs. And for many, many years, since with the advent of PBMs and third-party prescription plans, most patients have no idea what the other part of the drug is that's being paid for by their employer. They're familiar with the copay, of course, at the pharmacy counter, but they don't know the other part. And if you don't know what the other part is, it's hard to get upset, right? So now it's really starting, though, to kind of be something that we're becoming aware of. And, of course, somebody's paying for it, and it's us. It's all of us.
Right. And generic drugs effectiveness, yes, no?
So it's hard to make a blanket statement, but I can tell you from my own personal perspective, and I have a wife and 4 kids, and I take generic drugs wherever I can. There are a couple of kind of special scenarios where I don't necessarily recommend them, and that would be things where you take a drug that has to maintain what we call a narrow therapeutic margin. If maybe you suffer from seizures and you absolutely have to have a drug that stays within a certain blood level, right? So you're in those cases, it's typically best to stay with a brand name if you can afford it, if it's not financially prohibitive. Certain other drugs like warfarin for your blood thinning, again, a kind of a critical drug, has to maintain certain blood levels. Right. But for the most part, pain medications, antibiotics, blood pressure medications, diabetes medications, if they're FDA approved, we don't see problems with them. And so I generally recommend and take myself generic drugs where I can.
Cool. Robert Schenk, manager, Ambulatory Pharmacy Services at Meridian Health. It is that time. It is time to hand you the magic wand, the pixie dust, the fairy dust, the ability just to wiggle your nose and make a difference, make an impact, make something happen. What are you doing?
Okay, so I would wish that every pharmacist at every pharmacy get to provide the kind of services we do at Ocean Medical Center and Meridian through the Pharmacology Institute. And by that I mean they get to get out from behind the counter and get to talk to their patients, get to interact with their patients, and get the chance to do what I do, where I can sit down with somebody, lay out 10 or 12 different medications, have the time to go over them one by one. And that would be my wish, is if every pharmacist had the opportunity to do that, we'd have a much healthier society and healthier patients living, better quality lives, I think.
Very good, very good. Robert, where can folks go to learn more? Let's say they want to take advantage of this Meridian's, if they want to take advantage of the Pharmacology Institute, how would they go about doing that?
Sure. The website for Meridian and meridianhealth.com with a link to Ocean Medical Center. There's a link on that webpage for the Pharmacology Institute and for the services that I provide, which the initial service, it's free. It's called RX Check, and there's a form on that webpage that patients can fill out with their list of medications and any concerns that they have. And then they send that to me or fax it to me along with their, contact information. And I'll be happy to review it and see if they're at risk for medication-related problems. And if they are, then we can come up with a strategy of what to do about it.
Very good, very good. Robert, thank you so much for spending time with us. This was really super informative, and I think I'm sure that our listeners feel the same way. So thank you so much for your time this morning.
My pleasure, Jeremy. Nice talking to you.
Absolutely. Have a great day. We'll be back with more Wake Up with Jeremy Grunin right after this.
Thank you.
Rush Limbaugh today at noon. More Wake Up with Jeremy Grunin coming up next. News Talk Radio, WOBM AM 1160 and 1310.